talk about today is motivation for the quantified self. So one of the things that I've realized working in this field is that tracking just isn't enough. Tracking things is great, but at the same time, you really need to have the right mindset to actually motivate yourself to make changes based on the results of that tracking information. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was why quantified self, why I'm here, why I'm interested in it. And so for my research, I want to understand how medical technology and how patients understanding more about their health can actually enable them to make better health decisions. So as I think a lot about this, about how to motivate people, especially the elderly or people with chronic conditions, I thought about, well, how can I even motivate myself, and what do I do to motivate myself every day? And so, as it turns out, as a graduate student, I have a really hard time keeping a regular schedule. And one of the recommendations people may say to improve your life and change habits is to have a regular schedule. Well, I try that every semester, it never works. So what I wanted to figure out was ways that I can actually motivate myself to make a concrete change. So one of the things that I found was ultimately the case for me, which is also a lot of time true for the patients we work with, is that the thing that motivates you first and foremost is decline in health. So this is really kind of an unfortunate thing, but what happened with me was about a year and a half ago, I had some symptoms associated with irritable bowel syndrome, and I talked to my doctor and found out that I had a vitamin deficiency in my whole life. I had anemia, and I felt lethargic all the time, and I felt like helpless. I felt like there was really nothing I could do about it. There were really no concrete recommendations. But then, I felt this way for a while, but at the end I decided, you know what, I'm just going to pick something, I'm going to make some concrete changes, and I'm going to use quantified self to measure those changes and see what happens. So here's what I did. I went gluten-free, so I completely cut gluten out of my diet from September 1st until today. I drank at least 40 ounces of water every day, and I took 2 grams of methyl cellulose every day. So the gluten-free decision was really sort of more of my own. My dad had similar symptoms, and so he went gluten-free and helped him a lot. And then after meeting with a gastroenterologist, they also recommended introducing these other changes into my life. So I made these changes, and I tracked them in the following ways. So I tracked my bowel movements every day. Whenever it happened, I wrote it down, made any notes if I felt like it was relevant. I tracked how much food I ate, what time I ate it, and what I ate. I tracked how much water I drank every day, and I tracked the number of snoozes. And the reason I put the number of snoozes in here is because that's basically my worst habit, is that I snooze all the time. And I wanted to see if my diet changes and my hydration changes would have some sort of influence on that habit, which could potentially be related to my overall energy level. So I tracked the first 2 things using an app for Android called Keep Track. And the reason I picked this application was because it was by far the easiest one that I found. So I went through the Quantified Self website. I probably installed 20 different apps on my phone, and this was the only one that I picked up, and it was just like, okay, I can just use this. And anytime I need to jot something down, it's just really easy, and it worked for the 2 different things that I wanted to measure. For water and for snoozes, I used an app called Beeminder. And what I really like about Beeminder is, as they say, it combines quantified self with commitment contracts. So I've always tried to be good about drinking water, about doing snoozes, but it still happened anyway. So I thought that this sort of app might help motivate me a little bit more to actually make those more concrete changes. So I want to talk a bit about how I motivated myself to make my 2 big behavior changes, which were how to go gluten-free and how to drink more water every day. So going gluten-free was really difficult for me. I think it's really difficult for a lot of people, but the big things that I did was I set rules for myself, I rewarded myself, and I focused on the habit and not on the results. So when it comes to setting rules, I set a limit. I said I only have to go gluten-free for 60, 90 days. If I don't feel like it's working for me, I don't have to do it every day ever again, and I can have a beer. The other thing I did was I went cold turkey. So in that respect, I made it easier for myself. The answer was always no. That's it. I also rewarded myself. So I told myself that if I wanted to have chocolate or ice cream at any time, I could. And the first few weeks, I probably did that. But after that, you kind of get used to it, and you don't really need those same incentives like you do when you first start something. I also tried to cook more. So sometimes when you're trying to be gluten-free and you go out to a restaurant, you're really limited by the choices you have. But if you're cooking for yourself, you can really focus on the positive aspects of having a more restrictive diet. And the last thing was focus on the habit, not on the results. By this I mean, don't think every day about how your body's feeling. Really focus on making the change and being positive about it, and look at the results in 90 days. Just don't worry about it. I actually also had the habit of, I wasn't great about drinking enough water and about staying hydrated. So one of the best decisions I ever made for myself was buy a water bottle I really liked. So it was something that I was happy to bring with me everywhere. I only drank from that water bottle, and anytime I finished it, I wrote down 20 ounces. That was it. So I made it really easy for myself to just keep track of how much water I was drinking. The other thing I did to kind of coerce myself to drink water more rather than drinking other things was, if it wasn't water, I wasn't allowed to count it. So if I wanted to have soda, I could, but then I'd have to drink, another extra 8 to 5 ounces of water to make up for that. So there's a few different things that I learned about my health from making these changes. So I won't go into the data specifically, but these are the most important things that I learned. My GI symptoms definitely improved with all the different changes that I made, but overall my energy level didn't necessarily change. So there are certain things that I might still need to change in order to improve that in particular. I also noticed that I probably don't have any other food allergies, which is definitely a helpful information for moving forward. So I kind of just want to take a step back, and so I mentioned a lot about a specific experiment I did, but at the same time what I really wanted to talk about was how quantified self and motivation are related. So I found that when you're doing a quantified self experiment, you have the ability in that you're both the experimenter and you're the subject. So as the subject, it's your responsibility to be mindful and dutiful about making all the changes that the experimenter is really asking you to make, and that's your role in being a good subject. But at the same time, you also need to be a good experimenter, and being a good experimenter means not worrying about each individual data point and kind of letting everything take its course. With certain changes, it's kind of like watching the stock market. You don't want to watch it too closely, you just kind of hope it goes up. The next big thing is believe in change. So for over a year, I didn't make any changes. I didn't do anything because I really just didn't think I could do it. I didn't think it would make a difference in my life at all, so I just didn't bother. But now that I actually made, relatively small but overall concrete changes in my life, I know that now I'm enabled, and now that I can make other changes. So, looking back, going gluten-free wasn't actually that hard. And so if I can go gluten-free, there's, other significant changes that I can also make in my life. And the last thing I want to say is just do it. So I spend a lot of time thinking about all self-tracking experiments and motivation and everything like that, but at the end of the day, I wouldn't be here if I didn't actually do anything. So what really matters is to actually just have an experiment and just to start something. Looking back as I was kind of analyzing my data, I said, oh well, I was tracking snoozes, but maybe it would have been a good idea if I was also tracking exactly when I went to bed and exactly when I woke up, or how much sleep I got, or all of these other things. But at the end of the day, I wouldn't have had any information at all if I hadn't actually started. So, the quantified self-experiments we present here today, they're not intended to be peer-reviewed journals. Everything here is for you to learn something about yourself, so it doesn't really matter what it is or how you track it, but whatever you get out of it is what matters in the end. I think that quantified self is a really exciting area to be in. I really am behind it totally, personally and professionally. And I think one of the great things about being in Boston in this event is that we have so many people who are interested in developing tools, technology, and different ways to encourage people to use technology to better their lives. So really glad to be here, and that's all I got.
Questions?
Did you happen to take Accutane?
No.
Okay. There's just a huge link with females and
Oh, really?
with Accutane. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. It's like, oh, maybe that's it.
Yeah.
With the hydration part of your experiment, did you find that you would get behind and guzzle a lot, or would you be sipping throughout the day as you went through?
So I tried, I think it kind of was a little bit of both. So I think when I first did it, I wasn't always mindful about it, and so I'd be like, oh, I haven't drank any water, and then I would drink a lot. But the biggest reason I was bad about drinking water in the first place was because anytime I did that, I'd have to pee all the time, and I hated that. So I actually started to kind of moderate it a little bit, and because I had my water bottle with me all the time, I could kind of say, oh, you know, like I just finished something, I'm going to take a few sips of water, rather than bursts of consumption.
You work for Fitbit, correct?
Yeah.
They have a measurement device measuring your weight on a wireless recording, things like that?
Yeah.
How many times would you measure your weight, since you said don't pay very close attention to the data points so frequently? What is the ultimate number of measuring yourself by weight?
How much did I weigh myself during this?
How often?
For my weight?
Mm-hmm.
I probably weighed myself once every few weeks. I didn't really weigh myself very often during this experiment. That wasn't really my focus.
Well, I understand that. I'm just trying to ask you a professional comparison based upon your realization you made here, not to concern yourself with.
Oh, I see. Yeah, as far as weight tracking is specifically concerned, what people generally recommend is that you weigh yourself every day, but that you only look at a weighted average of your weight. So like a 7-day thing. It's like it's the thing called the hacker's diet, I think. You could look into that if you're curious about weight in particular. That's a good example of that, actually. Yeah.
What's some next goals that you have after this? Are you planning on continuing this, or do you have new aspirations?
So I went on vacation a few weeks ago, so that's when I sort of stopped monitoring this, because I felt like I had learned enough specifically about like my allergies and that aspect of it. But then one of the things that was really meaningful to me was that I thought, oh, well, you know, if I improve my diet, then my energy levels will be dramatically improved. You know, that was great, but it didn't actually turn out that way. So I think my next big goal is to try to exercise more regularly and also see how that might influence my overall energy levels. Oh.
Have you played with TickTrack yet?
I have not heard of
It's
that.
a little correlation engine. You put in all your data points, and it like comes up with, oh, due to this, and it's often associated with this other thing. So you should try it.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that. That should be interesting.
You mentioned anemia. Were you monitoring your iron levels in blood before and after the experiment?
No, so I actually didn't monitor my iron levels. The reason I mentioned the anemia is it's actually been something like persistent throughout the course of my entire life, although I think that it would be, so I've always kind of been like borderline low, but it's never been something where they've given me some sort of concrete recommendation that I've done anything other than take a multivitamin. That's definitely something that's I'll probably go get my iron levels tested again, because I got tested before I started this, so it's probably worth doing.
Okay. Can I follow up?
Yeah.
The two apps you mentioned, oh gosh, where are they?
Keep Track and BeMinder.
Keep Track and BeMinder, yeah. Were they, could you continue to use those, and if you wanted to start monitoring other things, I mean, were the apps usable that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
So I picked those sort of because I felt like they complemented each other well. One was for something that you might not want to analyze every day, but you wanted to keep track of over a long time, hence Keep Track. But then the other one, BeMinder, is meant to be something that you want to like be mindful of your goals every day. So that's why I used kind of two complementary ones.
Okay, thanks.
Last question.
I have a question. When you were going through your experiments with data and tracking a number of different things, did you feel the need to interact with other patients or other people going through a similar experience to you as a way to find similar support, or find innovative ways to maybe enhance the way you're measuring your various variables or what have you? Sort of, what was the relationship to other people that are doing similar things like you throughout your progression?
So I guess I would say that I didn't necessarily interact with anyone else who was also making these sorts of changes. I definitely talked to my friends and my peers about those changes, and people were, definitely supportive, and sometimes we would cook meals. We'd all cook a gluten-free meal together, so I wouldn't really feel like I was left out. But then the other big thing I did was I read a book called Wheat-Free, Worry-Free. And actually it's a really great book because it addresses all aspects of going gluten-free for, basically whatever reason. And in that book, they actually talk about the emotional consequences of going through a very restrictive diet. So at first, you're kind of gung-ho about it, and everything feels great. And then there's sort of this resentment and this depression associated with having this diet, especially around the holiday time where everyone is eating cookies and you're not. But that book actually really helped me a lot. So I didn't necessarily talk to anyone in particular, but I did have those resources.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much.